Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. Today, we're going to talk about Easylanguage. So the title of the class is Easylanguage Answered. We're going to have John Bruch with us in just a moment. John Bruch, by the way, he's Director of Easylanguage Services for TradeStation Technologies. And we'll pass the microphone over to him in just a moment. Today's August 4th. And we have to go through some of the disclosures before we start class. Keep in mind that every symbol and idea that we discussed today is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, active trading is not suitable for everyone, especially if you're trading risky products like options and futures that are leveraged. We all need to be aware of the risks of trading online. Also, past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. And anybody that wants a little bit more information on these disclosures, you can see the link right there on the PowerPoint slide, www.tradestation.com/important-information. All right, guys, thank you for being here. You have a couple of ways of submitting questions over to us. You can use the chat. Just make sure you set the chat windows to everyone. You'll see a little drop down right there at the bottom. And you're also welcome to use your microphones. So let me go ahead and enable that feature for you guys on your side. And that way you can speak to John directly. John, are you there with us?
I am here. Jesus, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, John. We don't get to speak that often, so I'm glad that we have these sessions every 2 weeks. So
it is good. Yeah. It's good to touch base. Yeah.
We usually chat a lot, over like messages and stuff like that.
That's true.
It's nice to hear your voice, John.
It is. It's good to talk to you.
All right, let's go ahead and stop my share here and talk a little bit about.
Let me share my screen. Okay.
Oh yeah, perfect, great, awesome. And John, I'm not sure if you have anything prepared for us.
I do. We had several questions, and some of them I'm going to talk a little bit, in general terms.
Okay.
If I don't answer this, specific question, we can continue at the forum. I think I'll get pretty close though on most of them. Let's start with this one, because we can you see this chart here? And I don't know if you can see this text.
Yeah, we can see it. Yes, definitely.
Oh, okay. So the first question, let me back up actually. The first question we had was about, I'm going to interpret it again in kind of general terms, about putting a piece of text on a chart and having that text remain there and in place as new bars form in real time, and having it display some sort of value that's updating in real time. And okay, that value could be almost anything, but let's just take a look. So the first, okay, to get started, you don't necessarily have to write any code, although we'll take a look at some of the code that could be behind a study like this. But you can use the built-in study called floating text. Okay, that's a built-in, and I put it here, and I'm going to change some of the inputs for it. So now we're going to say edit text, and I'm going to edit the indicator. So here I am in the floating text indicator, and I already changed this. I was doing a little bit of testing before class, and what we're going to, if we want to plot the value of a formula, then we'll need to convert the number that we want to display, or it could be a combination of some regular alpha text and a number, but we're going to have to convert any numbers to text. So we're going to use the num to string keyword actually to do that. And in this case, the text that I'm going to display is the average true range over 20 bars. the 3 here says show it in text out to 3 decimal places. Okay, now I said, well, okay, the original color that's in here is Dodger blue, but just to make this a little more visible, I'm going to change this to cyan, and I increase the text font size from, I think, 10 to 12, just to make it, again, a little more visible. And then we have 2 inputs that help us see where we're going to put the text. One is the percentage from the right that we want it to appear, and the other is the percentage from the bottom of the total. The percentages are of the total width or height of the chart. And then if we wanted in a subgraph, for example, if we wanted floating text that was down with an indicator in a subgraph other than the same subgraph as price, we could set this to true. So let's say we wanted in kind of the upper left-hand corner of the chart. In that case, the text percent from right might be something pretty high, like let's just start with 90, because we want it 90% of the way from the rightmost border of the chart to the left. So that's the percent from right. And then the text percent from bottom, again, it's going to be a fairly high number. Let's just say, I don't know, 90 again.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get it toward that upper left-hand corner. And we see, oh, okay, there we go. So now we have actually, let me put this on a symbol that updates a little more frequently, but and that way the average true range, you can see that the text remains in place. It's the idea of the floating notion. As new bars form, it just stays in its place there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, and we can take a quick look at the Easylanguage code. The Easylanguage code's a little bit complicated for this indicator, primarily because we wanted, well, I'll show it to you. Okay, so we've got our inputs up here, and we call this function text float ex. This is actually where the complexity lies. But although once you break it down a little, it's the most complicated thing is that we have to reposition the text if the size of the subgraph changes. That's really the only real complexity here. The rest of this is fairly straightforward, that although it's using objects rather than the old-fashioned text, it's using what we call a text label, which is how we speak about the drawing object that we have that does text now. So that we're going to create a text label, set some properties of it, and then we actually set the font here, add it to the drawing objects collection. This just causes it to display on the chart, and that's really it. So yeah. Okay, so now you say, well, look, if I had a few of these, I'd probably forget which number is which. You know, if I added this again, I mean, let's just say that I wanted something else in there too. And here, I'm just going to do the close just so that maybe I could use different colors, you know, so I'll remember which one is which. But let's just say ORANGE, orange. Let's just say I wanted to close there also, but okay. And the percent from right, would we say 90? And then the percent from the bottom, let's say we want this one a little below the other one that we've got there. So I'll put 88 and see where it shows up. So okay, there's the close. Okay, let me move that down a little. So now I've got the ATR and the close there. And I say, okay, is there any way I can adjust the label so I know what it is? Mm-hmm. And you can. So so what you could do here in the input is just put your string that you want, and maybe we want close, you know, kind of with a colon there or something, a little bit, and maybe a space after that. And then we're going to use the plus sign to concatenate the strings. So I don't know if you guys could see that, but it's close plus the that value. Okay. So then I'll go here. Oh, hey, there we go. Okay. So now, and we could do the same thing up here with little, you know, edit the text here and just put a little indication here that it's the, if I can get my mouse to work, that it is the ATR, like so, right? And now we've got a little more sophisticated display. And if we wanted to, we could concatenate other text. We could make one big piece of text that has the ATR and the close or whatever else, the RSI or anything else. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to show that, hey, you can put it on there multiple times and or create sophisticated strings as the input.
No, that is wonderful, because I think the concern was that, at least from one of the users, was that he was losing access to one of the trading app store indicators.
I was forgetting how that came up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was plotting, you know, similar information on the top left side of the chart, which is, you know, this is a great solution for that.
Right, right.
And I think even better, because it does allow you to, you know, modify it and make it, you know, look exactly the way you want.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And we could, you know, the reason I wanted to show that's exactly the reason I wanted to show the code was that making it look just exactly the way you want might entail something like, well, look here, I maybe I want, you know, a bold font. Well, you could create that. So the font class has the ability to make it bold and all that kind of thing. So that's the reason I just say it is in code, because if you want kind of advanced formatting of the text beyond what's provided through these inputs, then you can get into editing the code, create your own floating text. We've got the color, the font size. You know, if you wanted it italicized or, you know, that kind of special, you know, bold or all that kind of thing, you could do that, but you would need to modify the code. But that's the reason I wanted to show the code.
Yeah, that's great stuff. You know, that was great stuff.
Okay.
And thank you for that. You know, I hadn't noticed that floating text study, so that's great to be able to plot something like that on the chart, just to have some visibility. I know that many users here will find that very, very useful. All right.
Good. Okay. Let me move on to the next question.
All right, perfect.
So, okay. This one starts out with some code, that the user got in the support forum, which is a good starting point. And let me close some of this stuff so that we can take a look at this rectangle code. And the this is the code, and it plots so let's see what it does. Well, okay, we've got a method here, but let's see, where's the code that runs outside the method? Okay, down here. Well, what does that do? Okay, well, once we get to the last bar on the chart, we're going to call this function draw rectangle, this method, which is this method up here. And we're going to, drawing of a rectangle entails specifying 2 points. And the 2 points must be on a diagonal from each other in terms of the shape of the rectangle. So either upper left, lower right, or lower left, upper right. Okay. So actually, let me go to the dictionary and let's see what we're going to do, what we're going to use here. We're going to drawing objects, and again, we're into object-oriented easy language here. That's the only way the rectangle is available, is with objects. And what we're going to do is call a couple methods. We're going to call the start point and the end point. And we're, in this case, the code uses the upper left, lower right. So we'll set the start point and set the end point, set the fill color, a few other properties, and then that adding the rectangle that we created, we create the rectangle here, set the properties, add the rectangle to the drawing objects collection, and when we do that, it appears on the chart when we add it to this collection of drawing objects. Okay, so if we wanted to, we could make the starting point and ending point inputs, or we could modify them here as the variable values. And then I didn't have a chance to work on the code for that, but basically we would just have to specify the start date and end date, probably either as a string or through a month, day, and year, and then substitute those down here for the start DT and end DT.
To be able to enter a specific date, you mean, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Although at some point I said to myself, well, I probably ought to get some clarification on what the user's trying to do, because it wasn't clear to me how that would be really much easier than just drawing the rectangle, right? So I said, well, I mean, all you do, you come and say, okay, well, this is the date I want, and the date here, boom, I've got it here. So what would be the point of having it in code if we're just going to draw one rectangle? Now, if there's something that the code figures out and then creates a rectangle around it, and says, oh, I'm going to use that as a highlight for some condition, that I could see, I guess. But just from the start and end point, I said, well, you would just probably draw it, wouldn't you? Or rather than, otherwise, why? Because then you got to add study, configure the start and date time input,
You know, okay. What would be an idea? For example, that code that you created to draw a line between pivots, like a pivot high and a pivot low, to draw a rectangle around that area, right?
Yeah, I have a suggestion. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Who's this, Steve?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
I can tell you how I use a rectangle today, and you can tell me if you want to do anything about it. But I use a rectangle today to show a box on my screen so I can see what a dollar looks like on my chart. And I look at the last, say, 8 bars of activity. So then I draw my chart and I say, okay, I know what a dollar looks like. So if the price is moving, because I'm doing day trading, so as the price is moving within a dollar, I know that's the typical move of that market. So I keep moving it on my chart because it doesn't, I draw it, obviously it's a drawing object, so I got to keep moving it. I love it if it would just move itself every minute or every time frame on my chart. If it's a 2-minute chart, 5-minute chart, 15-minute chart, if it would just move itself, so I didn't have to keep redrawing it, because I got five or six markets I'm following. I got to move this rectangle 75 times a day.
Right. Okay, so that's a good. Now, when you say it shows, do you mean that the high of the rectangle is $1 above the low of the rectangle, or I'm not sure?
Yeah, I use like the highest price within the last 10 bars.
Oh, okay.
And Jesus helped me with this the other day using the price channel, where we subtracted $1, and then I was able to see what that looks like. And he helped me with the price channel indicator, and that's kind of helpful, but the rectangle is just a nice visual where you can just see what the price is moving, because if
And
you're in a
is it
move,
always 10 bars wide, the rectangle?
that's how I use it, but that would be
Okay,
a great
fine.
variable
Okay.
to have.
Yeah,
If-
okay. Yeah, we can, maybe we'll double back at the end of class, and if we wanted to, we could take a take a shot at that. The key to it is basically to detect that, hey, we've just closed a bar and open a new bar. So call the set start point and set end point to move them along. You know, that's sort of
Yeah, and I just use it for the day's session. So I know you were
okay.
talking about earlier, like a start date and an end date. I'm just using it for the session of today, but
Okay,
that's just my input. I'll
great,
shut up.
this
great.
is-
No, that's a good idea.
So, John, so this is in line with David's question in the chat, because we did talk about a begin date and an end date. So to Steve's point, I mean, those begin and end can be anything. They don't have to be dates, right? They can be the high and then subtract $1 from that high. Those could be our 2 points, right? Or no?
Well, for a rectangle, you need
A diagonal reference, right? You said.
correct. So you do need a reference to a date and a price. So in other words, you kind of need an XY point for either. Let's just say we're using upper left and lower right. We need the date and the price and time. Like you could think of this, I could use a crosshair pointer maybe. So if I use the crosshair pointer here to designate a point, I need both the X and the Y. So in other words, to designate this upper left, I need both a date time and a price. And then to designate the lower right, same thing, a date time, or in other words, the X, and a price, the Y. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, sure. If it's
yeah.
intraday, it would be the same date, but you can own. I mean,
Correct.
With the time,
the date may not change. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Why don't we double back and we can try to do some code after let me cover one more question and then we'll
Sure.
double back. Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. So this one too, it gets a little complicated. Let me just illustrate what the question was. This, you guys will remember, we had last time we worked on the pivots, and in this upper graph, I've got the code we worked with last time. And we were doing a bit of a zigzag kind of thing where we draw between pivot highs and lows. And we did not say that we wanted necessarily to specify that a pivot high is necessarily higher than a pivot low. So for example, someone says, well, look here, here's a pivot high, here's a pivot low, and the high is lower than the low.
Mm-hmm.
And that could happen. So that was one thing. And then we said, well, then a user came and said, well, look, what I'm really after is if you get into, let me try to find it, like this area right here, okay? Where we've got this low is actually just a little lower than this high, but you've got higher lows and higher highs, by which I mean kind of like a trending move. Then I don't really, it's rather than connecting the high to the low, what I want to do is make say, okay, keep going, because it was a higher high and a higher low. Keep going with the high, if you will. Yeah, I don't know if I'm saying this all correctly, but let me see if I can rephrase it a little, and maybe I can find a better example. I guess maybe this one right here, right in this area here. See, we've got a low and a high pivot, right? We come down and make this low pivot here. But this low pivot is above this low, so it's a higher low, right?
Mhm.
We go on and make a higher high. Then the user says, look, ignore these two.
Mhm.
Just go from this low to this high.
Mhm.
All right. That turns out to be kind of complex. So what I ended up doing was I said, okay, well, let's solve this first problem of we're going to force a high pivot to be above the preceding low pivot. So let me reset the scaling here. So now we're back aligned to the chart below here. So in this area here, you see in this new one, I changed it so that it ignores this pivot here. This guy, because this high pivot is lower than the low pivot. So it says, don't use that. And anyway, then what happens then is this low pivot also is ignored because we get a lower low. So we said, okay, here's the case where we get a lower low, use the lower low. Okay, so we did that here. So then we say, okay, now comes the complicated part, which is kind of like this area here where we get a lower low and then a higher high. This one is okay because we didn't get a higher high. We didn't get any pivot here at all. See, like right in here. So it's okay. It's easy to move the low when we get a lower low, right? The difficult one, the more complicated, is when we do get a pivot in between. Whoops. And I accidentally moved that trend line. When we do get a pivot in between, and then we say, well, we got a higher high, so ignore both of these
Mhm.
and go from this low to this high. Anyway, that's the piece I did not do yet, but I was going to say we could talk about how you would do it, and
Mhm.
probably it's a good one to go to the support forum on. But what you'd end up having to do, let me open up the code here. What you'd end up having to do is remember prior pivots,
Mhm.
put them in an array or something like that. And then because every time you get this situation where here, as soon as this pivot high is identified, you have to say, okay, was the preceding low higher than the starting low? Was the preceding high lower than this high? If it was, get rid of this whole thing and draw a new connection
Right.
between. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of memory involved, if you will. So that'd be the next step on that one. But I just wanted to kind of start
Okay.
the process. And
That's
yeah.
excellent. And for any additional modifications, this code, of course, can be posted in the forums, and somebody there can follow up and make the additional modifications, right?
Yes, or right. I mean, at some point here, one would really have to think about the real-time behavior that you want.
Mhm.
So the reason I say that is that once you have the chart here and you're looking back historically with 2020 hindsight, so to speak, it's easy to say, okay, hey, the low that I wanted was this extreme low down here, and the high that I wanted was maybe this extreme high up here, and just connect those two.
Mhm.
And that's visible in hindsight, but in real time, what did you want to connect? Because you didn't know that this high was coming, right?
Correct.
So at the time that, say, this high formed, did you want a line from here to here or not, or are you waiting?
Yeah.
So this kind of thing, because I think what happens is that you could end up with a situation where it's kind of redrawing a lot in real
Mhm.
time and negating prior pivots. you know, it's saying, oh, that turned out to be a higher low. What, of course, you don't know that until the new higher high is made. So,
Yeah.
so for example, did you want to draw this little segment here as soon as this little low pivot formed, or do you want to really delete it in real time, kind of get rid of it when this new high forms, that kind of thing, those kinds of considerations?
Yeah.
How do you want it to handle the real time, formation when you don't know what's going to happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are complexities that, you know,
Exactly. It starts getting really complicated now. Yeah.
and everyone will have a different opinion as to what to do.
Exactly.
So yeah, they can go in so many different directions.
Correct. But I just
Uh,
wanted to start on some of the, okay.
yeah. So
Now
right,
we could double back on the rectangles if you want, or we can,
let's just address some of the questions that are
All
coming
right.
through here. You're gonna share that code with us, right? And have an
Sure.
update. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
That was one of the questions here.
Okay.
PSK is asking, since we're gonna lose access to all trading app store apps in 3 weeks, any update, John? Is there any new information? I don't think there's any new information, John, other
No,
than
I have not heard anything new. I'm not necessarily following that on a day-to-day basis though. So we may need to check with those guys. That's
and when you say an update, PSK, I suppose you mean any update on which apps are going to remain and which ones are going to be removed. You know, it is my understanding that most of the apps are going to pretty much go away. I don't think how many, I have no information on how many apps we've actually contracted to have, you know, on TradeStation by default. But let me do some research. You know, let me ask some people that are involved in shutting down the trading app store and see if we have some more information on that. Okay.
and if there are particular ones, you may want to contact the developer and see what their plan is, you know, because I think some developers are planning to kind of distribute their applications themselves and so forth.
Yeah, that's a great idea because I mean, before we had the trading app store,
Right.
developers shared or sold their studies, you know, as on any different type of setups. So make sure that you reach out to them and see if they're going to continue supporting them. So the question is how to contact them. That's okay. That's a good question because now we don't have the trading app store, the directory to look up their numbers, right, John?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know whether that's a good question. We may have to check with those guys to see if they've kept there used to be a listing of all of them, but I thought in the, you know, that both the App Store developers and the Easylanguage specialists were both listed in a directory, but I don't know whether the directory is being retained or not.
Yeah, so let me find out. In fact, if anybody's using a trading app store that you're worried about losing, you can email me and I can get you the developer's contact information so that you can reach out to them directly, okay? So let me know via email and I'll do the research for you guys. Okay. Marcel, yes, we talked about, you know, the levels calc indicator. I'm not sure if you have that study. I know that I didn't pass this along to John, so John is unaware of what we're talking about.
All right.
But there is an indicator that Michael Bruch created that automatically drew horizontal lines. It's called levels calc. I'm not sure if you helped him with that.
I remember something about this.
And I'm not sure if you have it in your platform.
I might even have. Okay, let's see.
It's an Art of TradeStation. To start the name, it's at ArtTS.
I think I had
Levels Calc.
Levels Calc. CH, that
right
guy?
There. Yeah, that one right there.
Yes, and I made hi guys.
Hello.
Yes, that looks great. I made a couple changes to it after John worked on it last. which makes it look like the photo I sent to you with that language.
Yeah. So what Marcel added was, she wanted well, first of all, she uses this on Forex pairs. And
Right.
the additional information that she put in there is the number of pips that are between the two levels. So not only the difference, but the number of pips, and also what percentage does that represent? Is it a 20%, the in between the two lines, to be specific?
I see.
Yes, but here's the challenge. The challenge is that the number of pips, like I was able to work with the language and have it display, right? But the math is incorrect towards the bottom of the language that you modified before. So that the, two lines that you see, I just simply try to do the difference between those two for the number of pips. And, it didn't do it correctly. It thought it was 250. And I think it's because the basis points are not correct. And by the way, while we're here, when you use modify the inputs, the information doesn't really change all that much, but I think it's because I was only changing one line. So anyhow, having said that, I think the math is off in the way that I try to calculate the difference between the two lines, but I was able to get it to display. And I just wanted that to, wanted the percentage difference to show up.
Yeah. Did you ever post anything on the forums about this, or haven't had a chance?
I did not. I just got this from our class before.
Yeah.
And I just worked on it, myself. So I just raised the question because I think it's the math between the two lines that I was off. So that was the nature of it. I've just been working on it since the last time, we raised it here. I mean, it's a lot of language, and I was able to figure out some of the things, but not all of them.
Yeah. So, and I did say that I was going to look into it and try to find out.
No worries. It's okay.
I haven't had a chance. So I'll regroup with John later just to make sure that we can have that calculated.
And just specifically, I'm almost certain that I think that the basis point move is maybe off or something. And maybe I need to do something a little more sophisticated than taking the difference between the two lines there. So, but anyway, so I was asking about the math of that. So anyway, thanks guys.
Well, thank you for that, Marcel. Let me take a look again at the code, and if I need help, I'll make sure to reach out to John, and we'll get to a solution for this. And if not, we can always ask one of the guys in the forums to help us out. But it seems like it's a simple fix since you've already plotted some information there. We just have to, look at the map and see what's going on. Yes. Let's see. Okay, so let's for PSK, the indicator, the calc levels, is it somewhere? I don't think it is. I think it's available on the futures presentation that we did recently. Let me just look for it. Now let's John, you said you wanted to work a little bit on the rectangle one. Let's go ahead and address that.
Okay.
And see if you have any suggestions on how we can make it work.
Let me save this under a new name.
Yeah, like a real-time.
While you're doing that, to answer the question about the indicator, that whole package was available on the YouTube channel, Art of Trade Station, that Mike did.
It's the futures one,
You
right?
click on the link and all the information is below the window.
But it's a one on futures, right, Marcel?
I think it's just called, right. I think it's just called Art of Trade Station. He goes through all of the whole pack. I can look it up if you need, but they come all together.
Yeah. So yeah, let me see if I'll find a link here. And in the meantime, John, yes, David is also asking about a rectangle that updates in real time and it just keeps on moving along.
Yes. I was just thinking about that. And what the best way to do that is okay, so let me look at one thing. So let me just take a look at something here. I think we did the floating text indicator using XY point positioning. So let's just, yeah, we did. Okay. So here are the XY points. The reason I wanted to look at this was with respect to the rectangle was that when you use XY point positioning, the drawing object appears to remain in the same place as new bars form. So the behavior that we wanted, we were describing for a rectangle is similar to the behavior that we already have here for floating text, right? Which is that it just remains in place. The place we wanted is over here for the rectangle, but it just remains in place. It doesn't, as new bars form, it doesn't start shifting to the left, which is the problem we're having with the rectangle. So there are a couple ways we could do the rectangle. One of which is to do it with XY points, where it would kind of just stay in this location even as new bars form, just like this text does. Or we can move it along as new bars form. And moving it along as new bars form might be a better approach because we might have a new high, right? So as soon as the bar closes, we say the value, to use David's example, if it's an offset from the highest high over, excuse me, the last n bars, we might have a new value every time a new bar closes. So, okay, so here, this actually is not a bad starting point. So let me apply it actually to this chart. And I guess I need to verify the code here. And let's see what happens here. Okay, so it's on the current bar. It goes some number of bars back. And that just happened to be already set to 10. And let's go look at this. Yeah, there it is. See, 10 bars. Okay, and it's done just once, and then the rectangle stays in place. So maybe we can just modify this code and say, look, if we get the closing tick of a bar, actually what we want is the opening tick of the new bar. So what I'm going to do is create a variable that's called bar stat, and it's going to be, no, I take that back. I'm going to call this last tick was bar close. And the value for that is going to be true if bar status is equal to 2. So let's declare that variable here. It'll be a bool. And we'll call it last tick was bar close. Why do I want that? Why do I need to know that? Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Why do I need to know that the last tick was bar close? Well, because if the last tick was the bar close, and now the code's running again, I know I'm on the first tick of the new bar. Okay, so if the last tick was bar close, then and the first tick of the new bar is when I want to move the rectangle, right? Okay. But I'm going to make this guy intrabar persist because I only want to do it on the first tick of the new bar, not on every tick in the new bar. Okay. So if the last tick was the bar close, then what do we want to do? We want to set the start and end point to some new values, right? Okay. Set the start point and I'm gonna need to redo this part too. Okay. So the start date time will become the starting bar. Where did we get the starting bar? P start bar comes from where? Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. So what we really want is to reset these guys. Okay. So, okay. And we wanted the highest high like we had here, right? Highest high for bars back. We're basically going to redraw the thing. Okay. We've got actually. Okay. I see now. All right. Okay. My bad. Okay. We're going to do the same process again every time, every new bar. I see. Okay. So really all we needed to modify, I headed down the wrong path. I said, oh, I'm going to adjust the rectangle every time. But really, we just need to call this method again and only create a new rectangle if we don't already have one. Otherwise, just move it. Okay, so if the rectangle is null, then we'll create one. Otherwise, we're still going to do all this other stuff. And same thing here with the drawing objects. If drawing objects contains the rectangle, I think we've got a contains method on this thing. Contains. Maybe we don't. Oh, I know. Oh, if drawing objects. Let's see. Contains. Equal items. Oh, items. Let's see. Drawing objects. Let's see if it has. Okay, where is drawing objects? Let's see. Oh, I think it's in the analysis technique class. Okay. Items is a vector. Okay. 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 I'm not sure about this part. Okay. So let me just leave that for now.
Mm.
Actually, I think what I can do is like that. Okay. So what we're going to do is say if current bar rather than last bar is not equal to, we'll create a variable called bar num. Then we need to move this along. Otherwise, we don't. Okay, so bar num will set to current bar. You guys following this? So what am I doing here? So at first I thought, okay, I'm going to need to move the rectangle along. And then I realized, well, actually, every time we run the code, we just need to have a variable that says, have I moved the rectangle to the current bar? And the way we'll detect that is we'll have a variable called bar num. And if it's equal to current bar, then I know that I positioned the rectangle on the current bar and we're good for the duration of the bar. If it's not equal to bar num, then I need to call the draw rectangle with the same parameters I was using before. I'm going to use the highest high and the lowest low, although instead of the lowest low, we could just use the highest high minus some value if that's what we want. All right, so, but let's just see here. What do we have here? Okay, so interbar persists, this guy becomes a bool. I mean, an int stays as an int, but its default value is 0. All right, so now, here we have our current bar. Now, let's just make this like a 10-second bar so we can get some bars generated here. And we've got it from the highest high to the lowest low. And see what happened there when the new bar formed?
Mm-hmm.
It moved. Let me spread this out so you can see how it's moving every time. So every time we get a new bar, which we'll get here in a second, it'll see how it slid the rectangle over
Mm-hmm.
and use the new highest high and highest low. That we haven't had a new high or low here, but let me spread this out even more just so we can see what's happening. But sorry, spread that out a little more. Okay, so every time we've got a rectangle between the highest high and lowest low over 10 bars. And every time we get a new bar, it's doing the same thing. Now, what we kind of want to have, here we go. Now we're going to make a new low. Oh, we didn't. I was hoping we were going to make a new low so we could see the rectangle shift vertically, but now it's moving in real time. And it's always going to show the last, encircle the last 10 and the highest high and lowest low. Now, if what we wanted was an offset from the highest high, we could just, you know, I can do that now, or we could change it. But I think what we were saying was what we really wanted was the highest high -1, right? Or something like that. Highest high over bars back. Right. -1, I think is what we were saying, rather than from the highest high to the highest low. Okay, so, and let's just put this on something that, on a symbol where the 1 point is not a very big rectangle. In fact, it's going to be too small here because we're in 4,000 and something, right?
Mhm.
But
But
the
this is-
key
this is
really
pretty cool.
wasn't
Yeah.
wasn't the high and low of the rectangle. The key to the whole thing was moving the bar along,
Yeah, exactly.
moving the rectangle along. And the way we're doing that, just to recap, is we've got an intrabar persist variable called bar num. Starts at 0. If it's not equal to current bar, which will happen when we get a new current bar. When we get a new current bar will not equal bar num, but we'll set bar num to current bar at that point and update the rectangle. So every time we get a new current bar, every time current bar increments, it will be not equal to bar num, because bar num is just a variable. It doesn't update automatically what current bar does. And then bar number, these two will be not equal. We'll make them equal and adjust the rectangle position. And so every time we get a new bar, that's how we're gonna. So here's our, it is a little bigger. Okay, so here's the highest high -1.
Mm.
And every time we get a new bar, it's the highest high over the number of bars that we specified as an input -1.
That's very cool. Very cool. Very nice.
And save David some work. 75 times he's moving that.
Yeah.
That was
That was Steve, but yeah.
Yeah.
this
Oh,
is
Steve,
great.
I'm sorry, my fault.
No problem.
Oh,
David
okay,
is
yeah,
asking.
Yeah,
Steve,
but
David
save
but I
Steve
could
some
see-
work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I can
Go
see
ahead.
how other users could use the different parameters too. So,
Yeah.
your
Absolutely.
highest high to your highest low, I can see that being very helpful. And
I can make those inputs. That's a good point. So in fact, I'll do that with the code that I'll give Jesus after class, but we'll make these two values inputs so that because the number of bars is already, the width of the rectangle, if you will, is already an input. The height of the rectangle should be between, two easy language expressions. It could be the highest high and the highest high -1, or it could be the highest high and the lowest low, or the lowest low and the lowest low +1, or whatever.
I don't know what I'm going to do with all my free time now. If I don't have to draw these rectangles.
Let me, yeah, that's great. Not having to move a rectangle 75 times. Oh my God.
That's right.
David is asking if this can be used for past events like an all-time high.
Yes, it could. So then you say, okay, when do you want to redraw? You'd say, well, okay, look, if it makes a new all-time high, that's when I want to redraw the rectangle from the new all-time high down to, I don't know, the new all-time high minus something or whatever.
How do we identify the all-time high? How do we
Yeah,
identify that?
that's actually kind of a trick. The all-time high.
We have the high of the year, right?
Yes.
But not an all-time high.
Correct. That's the trick. You can do the highest high of the chart, but you should really do it on a walk forward basis, not trying to look back, because if you try to look back for the whole chart, you end up with a max sparse back problem. So you really need to write code that's sort of, I'll just show kind of a demo here, but if you're doing kind of quote unquote all time values, which by all time we just mean whatever's on the chart, then you need to create a variable. Let's just say we'll call it ATH, all time high, right? And the way that you would have to do something like this is that you'd say if the high, this is doing it on a walk forward basis, is greater than the ATH, then the ATH, and I'll plot this just so you can see, is equal to the high, right? So then if I plot the ATH, it can only go up, right? So let's just put that on the chart just so I can show you, but this guy, and maybe we'll make this kind of thick just so we can, red is fine, just so that we can, and I guess actually we want the scaling to be same axis as the underlying data, and I'll set that as the default. That's how we're gonna always want that study. So now we're gonna have to find that guy. Oh, there it is, way up there. So there's our all-time high for the chart. Now, if you put more data on the chart, obviously it's gonna include, but that's as close as we can get to an all-time value for anything.
Unless you make it an input and you enter it manually.
Oh yeah,
right?
sure.
You know
You
the
could
price,
do
you
that.
can,
That's
yeah,
right.
you can enter it manually and then do any calculation based off that price.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's beautiful. That's great stuff. All right, so how many new examples did we show here that are not included in your ELD EA studies? Did we show 2 or just 1?
Well, let's call the moving rectangle 1.
Okay.
And if we want to, we can include this modified version of the pivots that we did before that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure people here will enjoy having the more the merrier.
All right. So I think those were kind of the 2. Oh, and this is just using the built-in floating text, so there's nothing here, nothing new.
Yeah.
So I think it's just 2. It's the rectangle and the pivots.
Yeah, anyone that wants to review the floating text, just watch the archived video and you'll see exactly, just follow the steps on the video. Yeah, so yeah, send me, when you get a chance, John, send me an updated ELD
All right,
study
will
so I
do,
can
will
share
do.
with class. And that way everybody has, the custom code that you've
I'm going to
worked
make
on.
these inputs, the price levels for the horizontal.
Yeah.
I'm going to make those inputs and modify that code to do that, and then I'll send it to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that's pretty much it, John. I think we went through all the questions in the chat. Thank you so much for your examples, and thank you for always joining us. I know that the masterclass guys really appreciate your presence. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesus, and I appreciate your help too. And you're welcome. My pleasure.
All right, John. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
You guys too.
Wonderful afternoon, everyone. I'll see you next class. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.